DRC Scope TV, the perfect way to unwind. Njia kamili ya kupumzika.
Hello everyone, we are back with one more interview here at the office of Congressman Christopher Smith. It's an honor to be here with you, African people. In the name of African people, of course, I really appreciate for this interview.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for your work. I mean, in getting the message out, including what's going on here, because there's a great deal of concern and empathy for those who are suffering in the DR Congo and in Rwanda. We just want the bloodletting to stop.
That's why we are here.
Exactly.
So, Congress, before we get into the real questions about the conflict between DRC and Rwanda, I really want our viewers in Africa, in Angola, in Rwanda, in the Democratic Republic of Congo to understand what role do you play in conflicts in Africa as a lawmaker, as a Congress? What really is the role that Congress, the House of Representatives, play in conflicts in Africa?
That's a great question. I don't think I've ever been asked that, particularly in comparison with what the executive branch does. Obviously, the Secretary of State and above all the President is the implementer of foreign policy, and they make a lot of it. But the Congress is the power of the purse, the power of the funding for passing laws that create the parameters for human rights to be respected. For example, I've actually authored 5 major laws, including the first one, the historic one, called the Trafficking Victims Protection Act of 2000. And that then gives the executive branch the ability to carry forward, that is the President, the Secretary of State, with programs to mitigate and hopefully end sex and labor trafficking. So the role we play is to create programs and policies through law that then hopefully are faithfully implemented by the executive branch as we go through the weeks, months, and years. And so we do oversight. We do a lot of fact-finding as members of Congress. Both I chair the Africa Subcommittee, and we're continually asking hard questions, not only of the executive branch, and we get answers, but also and above all of people that are involved in the conflicts to try to stop where there's a war or a terrible situation like we see in Nigeria, where Christians and non-Islamic radical jihadist Muslims are not are being killed in huge numbers. And so I've been raising that issue for decades. Same way with Rwanda, same way with DR Congo. A matter of fact, when I discovered that the peacekeepers in Goma were committing atrocities against kids, 12, 13-year-old kids committing crimes, including rape. I held 4 hearings, and I actually went to Goma as part of an oversight effort, because I wrote the law to combat human trafficking, and how dare a peacekeeping group led by Ambassador Swing, who is an American, allow this kind of horrible behavior to occur. They're there as peacekeepers, not as exploiters, and they were exploiting kids. So we had 4 hearings on it. We really pressed the United Nations hard. I had them testify as well, to do a policy that says no more, you are part of protection, and anyone who violates that and rapes a woman or commits a crime against a child, they should be prosecuted. We found out that in follow-up, they were just sending them back to their home country of origin, where they came as a peacekeeper, and they were anything but. There have been some reforms at the UN, but I held the hearings, wrote the law. I even put in my law that peacekeepers need to be judged as to how well or poorly they're doing as it relates to trafficking. So we have a very comprehensive. The president can't do much in terms of law unless we pass it in the House and the Senate. He can do a great number of good things by executive order, as long as it stays within the parameters of policy. And then he can be the ultimate peacemaker to try to get disparate parties together to argue, like he did with DR Congo and Rwanda, to get the heads of state together, have them sign a peace agreement, and then admonish them to live up to their word.
Thank you, Congress. You touch in a very sensitive point, which is the rape of women, abuse on children. I actually witnessed that. Okay. I went to DRC. I spoke with women that faced those atrocities, and they themselves told me. So I've heard President Trump many times mention that what he wants the most is save life,
Yes.
is to avoid people being killed. Can you explain more for the point of view of Congress? How do you see the conflict in DRC? It's been millions of Congolese being killed
That's
this
right.
war, and President Trump finally decided to join the efforts to bring peace. But generally, how do you see this conflict? It's prolonged for so long, and President Trump already did his part. He bring together the presidents, and he made and signed the peace agreement. But first, before we go into the peace agreement, how do you see this over 30 years war, millions of Congolese killed, women's raped, children being abused? How do you assess all of that?
Well, these are crimes against humanity. They are being done either with the full complicity of, or at least allowing terrible, disparate parties to do terrible things. I do believe that, Paul Kagame needs to rein in the exploitation of minerals that he is very much, his country is very much a part of, because what happens then? That leads to conflict. That leads to taking cities. We know the minerals in DR Congo are very, very plentiful and very, very, if that could be used to raise the standard of living for every Congolese, it would be a godsend. It would be a miracle, and it should happen. And then we met with President Tshisekedi last week, and you were there, you were outside doing interviews. And I asked him, I said, whatever we can do to keep the wealth inside your country. So everybody, there was a famous saying, a rising tide raises all boats. Well, a rising tide of economic prosperity that is really shared by the people will improve their quality of life in terms of food, clothing, shelter, power, to have, I'm a big proponent of Power Africa, because Africa does need the ability to have generation of electric, but and you mentioned about the rape. I went to a Cure Africa NGO right outside of Goma, and I never met so many women who had been horribly and brutally violated, raped in a group, and these women found faith and reconciliation, but they're traumatized.
Yeah, Congo is
Yes.
actually the #1 country in the world that has the most women raped.
Oh, that's so horrible.
So that's why
Yes.
this conflict, as everybody is mentioned, the ones that I spoke with, they really want to end.
Yes.
What is the role that the Congress play? You mentioned to me about these
Resolutions, right.
Can you explain?
Yeah, the role that we can play. Obviously, the president has done a tremendous job of getting the two parties, and Secretary of State Marco Rubio did a magnificent job as well, and others, to get them together in the same room, decide, there are different peace processes that have been occurring. This one seems to be bearing fruit, but it may, hit a U-turn if the violence begins to re-escalate, which we saw 2 days after the signing ceremony just a few miles away from here, and I was there for it. I had to pinch myself and say, I can't believe this. We've all been praying and hoping and working towards this for decades. I remember when, we got all worked up, as we should, about what was going on in Darfur. I went to Khartoum. I met with Bashir, who, was indicted by the ICC, and was very concerned about the slaughter of people in Darfur. And then I remember a number of people, including Ben Affleck, who said, but there's a big, and we knew it, but there wasn't a focus on, then it was 4 million people dead in DR Congo, and there was almost nothing being done to combat that. So I held a series of hearings. He testified at one of them to try to raise everybody's awareness, including my own, and seek answers. People are getting rich off dead bodies and women who have been exploited. That has got to end. I even did a bill that's passed in the Ways and Means Committee, has not gone to the floor yet, on trying to stop a supply chain that is totally tainted by the Chinese Communist Party. The EVs are, people like electric vehicles, but one of the substances that run them in the batteries is being mined in DR Congo with about 25 to 40,000 kids, child labor, and about 200,000 adults. Total exploitation. So I did 4 hearings on that one as well, and it did a bill that says anything that goes to Xinjiang for processing comes back here in an EV is inadmissible to the United States because of how it was produced. We need to clean the supply chains. Cobalt, you know, if somebody wants an EV and it needs cobalt, okay, get it from a source where there are mining practices that are not exploitative, and then, you know, have your car. But don't drive a car around that's been made on the backs of little kids in the DR Congo and their parents. So supply chains are extremely important. Gold is now being, in large amounts, being processed. We know that. You know, we just got to say supply chains have to be clean, or else it doesn't show up in the United States market. So that's why I have this bill in on the cobalt. It would create a presumption that it was made with child labor and forced labor, unless the producer, that would be China, can show otherwise. And they can't. They just can't. Even if they lie about it, they can't make any credible argument that it's not being done in a very exploitative way.
So this resolution
Yes.
haven't been passed?
That hasn't passed. That's just an encouragement to the president to keep on doing what he's doing, to let him know that we do care. That's why I'm having hearings, to keep the parties. You know, if you take your mind off what's happening, if Congress all of a sudden says, been there, done that, got the T-shirt, and moves on, you know, the bad actors can say, okay, now we're freer to exploit and to kill and to maim. And so there's going to be, I believe, a number of actions taken if this doesn't turn around quickly. It's already too many weeks since the signing of the peace agreement, and you know, I know the president's upset, as are others. You know, stop killing. You know, we're all sick and tired, all over the world. Doesn't matter what continent you're on.
Yeah,
sick and tired of all the dead, innocent people.
Evidence, Congress Smith. The United Nations, many international organizations
Yes.
have witnessed, they have been
Without a
following
doubt.
the killing in DRC. And
Yes.
this is actually what motivates everyone to be involved in this conflict, but because this needs to end. But you have said...
But they also, you know, the UN has done some very good reporting on how many displaced persons there are. When M23 made their strong push, you know, beginning, what, 5 or so years ago, I was like, oh, not again, not again. Here they go again, killing people, raping women, and then displacing so many tens of thousands of people who, out of sheer survival, have to leave their homes and go on the run.
When you receive those reports, what the report says, who is committing this atrocity, Congress?
Well, M23 is one of them, and we've been raising that issue repeatedly. I mean, 2 days after the peace treaty, they invade again. Are you kidding me? I mean, that is such bad faith. They think we're not kidding. And that's why serious sanctions need to be levied on any bad actor, and that goes right to the very top if necessary. Generals, anybody else in the chain of command that is a part of it, and that's what we're asking. Tomorrow's hearing will be doing that in part. You know, we got to say we have sanctions that can make a difference. I wrote the Belarus Democracy Act in 2004. Lukashenko, the dictator then, still the dictator now. All these thousands of people have been incarcerated who are religious and political prisoners. They want democracy. I just had a hearing on it again last week. Well, the bill said 2 things. One, if you're put on a sanctions list under the Belarus Democracy Act, you can't do business here in any way, shape, or form, and you can't get a visa. We then morphed that and evolved that into global Magnitsky, which right now there are people in Africa, especially DR Congo and especially in Rwanda, who could be sanctioned pursuant to that law, the Global Magnitsky Act, and they will become absolutely unable to do any business in the United States. Any of our banks, anything, you name it, they are now precluded that opportunity. And if they want to come here, forget it. You're not going to get a visa. And I remember when I got the bill passed in 2004, Lukashenko, 200 of his top people were all put on that list. And all of a sudden, political prisoners were coming out. Now, it needs to be renewed. I'm trying to renew that bill. But we do do have global Magnitsky that we can apply in this case and other sanctioning capabilities. And I think the president, he's the kind of guy that wants it to work, wants to admonish, wants to say, please, just do it. But when it gets to the point where it's not done, they got to wake up, because he will be very strong, and Marco Rubio, in saying, time's up. We turn the hourglass, time's up. We want you to protect your people and stop hurting so many millions of people years to date and hundreds of thousands even now.
But Congress, if violation continues and enforcement is delayed, what role should Congress play to ensure this agreement is taken seriously?
Sure.
You mentioned about sanctions, and everybody last time when you just did an interview, like a quick one, were asking how these sanctions will look like and what exactly are you planning
Okay,
to President?
we're continually dialoguing with the president and the Secretary of State and his entire State Department, the people involved in Africa in particular. And they get it. They're very smart people, very good people. I mean, I know Marco Rubio for decades. He and I co-chaired the China Commission before he was elevated to Secretary of State. I sat with him one time after another, working on China policy. He's a very committed man and wants...
He's aware of what's going on.
Oh, he's totally aware of it and wants it to change. You give so much time. Time can mean dead people too, and raped women.
Every day, people still being killed.
So that's why we're asking. That's why I did the hearing a couple weeks ago, and tomorrow, and there'll be more of these done to try to hold bad players to account.
Who are those bad players?
Well, I really think that Paul Kagame needs to be held to account. He's got to come clean on this, and he's got to order publicly that the killings stop. That's it. Bring back the people that are doing it. Don't make a dime illicitly through those mineral deposits, not even a dime, and just cut off that supply chain. There are many people in Congress who visit with him, pray with him. Well, I've been asking them, talk to him and tell him to stop it. I did a hearing years ago on Paul Kagame when we found out that some of his top people in his government were being targeted for assassination. Everyone said, oh, it's not true, it's not true. So I had a recording of one of them where the recording came in while this man was in South Africa hiding. And I got it to the State Department, who was totally disbelieving. I could give you the hearing. And all of a sudden they said, wow, that's real. You got to treat people with respect. And Kagame and everyone else has to detect Shetty, everybody with total respect. And the old ways have to end of just killing people. And again, having met so many women, like you have, who suffered brutal rapes, in some cases, gang rapes, right in front of their husbands to further demoralize them.
Well, you know very well.
I couldn't believe when
I testified. They told me those things.
I know. It's exactly what's happening and happened. And it's got to stop. And people need to go to prison for that. And certainly people who are allowing that as part of their, the authorities they have in government, they've got to be held to account as well. So I'm hoping the president, and his people are very well aware who the actors are. We have great intel. We've got a very comprehensive intelligence. So I think it's time to push that button and say that's it. We want this to work. I couldn't believe, again, how comprehensive the peace agreement was, how it also focuses on trying to end the exploitation of people working in the mines, because I've met with many of those people as well, and particularly in the ones that are being run by the Chinese Communist Party. And I raised that with President Tshisekedi when he was here. I said, the Chinese will exploit everything you have. They do it in other African countries as well. Take the wood, take this, take that, take the minerals. And what do you get back? Bupkis. You don't get anything back that's of worth. They even bring in their own people to do the work, particularly in this case, the overseeing of the mines. And they beat people. They have arrearages. They don't pay them, which is awful as well. And, shame on the companies that sold out to them, too. And there's some Americans in that list, so the Chinese took over those mines. So it's a very serious problem. But this peace agreement and all its cluster of agreements was an effort to say comprehensively, stop the war. Stop the war.
And Congressman, from the intel that you have
Yes.
received, have any time you receive any information about abuse of Banyamulenges or the Tutsi Congolese people, because sometimes the government of Rwanda, they claim that the international community and everybody is too much based on all the evidence that we already know, the aggression against the Congolese people, but not so much care about the Banyamulengs or the Tutsi Congolese people that are also being facing violation. Have you ever received any intel, any data, any information from international organization or even from the United Nations that the Rwandese people have been aggressed by Congolese people?
We hear talk of that, and if there's some evidence, we need tomorrow, maybe at our hearing, we'll.
But have you ever received anything?
Not much, not compared to, who is doing the aggression. I have found over the years, whether it be the Balkans War with Serbia, when they invaded Croatia and Bosnia, there was a whole bunch of people that said, oh, they caused it. And it was like, what? There was an invasion force that came in first into Croatia and then into Bosnia. The tanks were coming in one way. Where are the killers and the people with the weapons coming in? They're coming across the border, and of course they want minerals. This is all about money, and it's got to end. And I do think the UN plays a role, and it needs to play even a more aggressive role in calling out. Don't always do this. Wow, they're both in fault. I'm so tired of that line.
Yeah, because that's what I want to know. If you have received any substantial information about the killing of those people that Rwanda claim that the Banyamulenge or the.
Well, we do hear, but again, the way to stop this is to hold the top leadership to account.
Which is who?
Rwanda, that would be Kagame and his people, and anyone in Tshisekedi's orbit that are doing wrong, and to do it now. Delay is denial for the person, the woman about to be raped, and the man or woman or child about to be slaughtered. And as you know, there's so many refugees streaming across the border or internally displaced, and they're not getting. We've encouraged the Congolese to do more and to ask what can we do to be more helpful to make sure they have food, clothing, and water. I've been in many refugee camps in my time, even when all the Sudanese were piling into refugee camps, and even going into Museveni's country, Uganda. I went to those camps, and it's like, oh boy, there's no end to people who have to give flight or leave simply to survive, and those kids get traumatized. The amount of PTSD has to be overwhelming in any war zone. It always is. So. And I also have been encouraging even more with Senko and with the bishops, because I always meet with the faith community, and that goes all across Catholic, Christian, evangelical, Muslim, to be listened to more and to be part of the peacemaking by the governments. No tangential role. Yes, they'll be praying and they'll be part of it. They need to be central to it. It could make a difference.
Mm-hmm. Just to end our interview, Congressman. Yes. You mentioned about the situation in the refugee camps. I actually had the opportunity to visit 2 refugee camps in Burundi, because Burundi right now is the country where Congolese affected by the war are fleeing to. Many of them from Uvira, that was just recently attacked, they are in Burundi. And I visit the conditions of these people is heartbreaking. No water, no food, babies dying, pregnant women, traumatized women, everything so bad. What can Congress do to help also in terms of humanitarian situation for Congolese people? Because the president of Burundi, I had a sit-down interview with him to understand how much Burundi is helping those refugees. Of course, they are doing what they can. They don't have much also. They give the land, because at the beginning, they prepare a space for 20,000 refugees, but they are coming every day because of the violence. And now there are over almost 80, 100,000 Congolese refugees coming every day enter Burundi. But what Congress can do
to help in terms of humanitarian situation?
Well, we do provide humanitarian assistance to refugees, and food has always been central, medicines, shelter. So we need to do more because the crisis has not abated. It's gotten worse. And we still have a similar situation in Sudan, where refugees are now growing, not diminishing, because of the killing fields there. So, yes, we need to do more.
Thank you, Congressman.
Thank you.
Anything more that you would like to add that maybe I didn't ask, but you wanted to touch base?
No, there is a peacekeeping force there. I think they need to be robustly engaged with rules of engagement to try to stop the violence. They were renewed by the United Nations, so it's
Last time you mentioned about MONUSCO
Yes,
not being
yes.
effective.
Well, the complaint over the years has been that they, and we got the same complaint out of the Sudanese as well, but that they stay barracked. They need to be much more robustly trying to stop the violence. And so it comes down to rules of engagement. It comes down to a lot of things. And, it is a rather large deployment, and I think they could make a huge difference.
I think maybe next time we can focus on Sudan, because I know
Yes.
the administration is already moving. Mr. Boulos,
Yes.
he held a ceremony, an event to support the humanitarian crisis in Sudan. And he
Yes.
mentioned that President Trump is also focusing to bring peace and to help in terms of humanitarian cause in Sudan. Maybe next
right.
time we can focus
That would be
on
great. That would be
Yeah,
great.
we can-
I remember going to Kama Camp in Mukjar, two of the camps in Darfur, and the one camp, the number of people who turned out was very remote. And when the helicopter landed with the people from the U.S. government and me, I headed the delegation. They were wild with excitement, and I'm thinking, I hope we can deliver. Then we were trying to get Bashir to stop helping the Janjaweed. I went to the United Nations, went to the Human Rights Council. It was commissioned then. And they wouldn't come down hard enough as to what was happening there. They couldn't call it a genocide, which it absolutely fit the definition of a genocide, trying to destroy a people in whole or in part. And then we thought, we got to a relative peace, if you want to call it that, and now that's all unraveling. Ditto for South Sudan with Salva Kiir. We thought that was going to be a model. And then there was bloodletting and killing and even raiding of humanitarian assistance, which prompted me to go over to South Sudan to meet with him and others. And it was just, every time we turn around, there are bad actors who are just exploiting people, getting richer in the process. And it's always, that's always part of this, that certain individuals, get huge bank accounts on the backs of dead people and wounded people.
And to close, last question, Congressman Smith, I really want you to send a clear message to Rwanda and to the people in Congo.
We are trying our very best, working with President Trump, who gets it and cares deeply about all of your welfare. We want to stop the killing. We want the minerals and all of the other extractions that are occurring to inure to your benefit, not somebody else's, so that your standard of living can be significantly increased. So we're with you in prayer, we're with you in actions, and we'll use every lever at our disposal, including sanctioning, to try to achieve just ends. Injustice need not be forever.
That's for Congolese people, right? Yes. And for Rwanda?
Rwanda is that they need to raise with their president an end to all of this. There needs to be, both presidents signed the peace treaty. Both presidents were at a very public ceremony. And again, I couldn't have been happier with both presidents thinking, okay, they get it and they're going to stop it. They need to stop it.
Thank you, Congressman. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. Very nice to meet you.